Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Wiam Neymoun, and our guest today is Alise Alousi. Hello, Alise.
Good morning, Wiam. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. I know that you have a new book that I'm so excited to talk about today. But first, the book is called What to Count, which was published in August 2023 by Wayne State University Press. So congratulations for that. But Alise is a 2019 Kresge Literary Arts Fellow and has received awards and fellowships from the Knight Foundation, Mesa Refugee, Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing, and others. She has worked at In-N-Out Literary Arts in Detroit for 2 decades and has taught in the past poetry through the Arab American National Museum's Teen Writing Fellows Program. So you've been involved in the literary world for quite a while.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I feel really fortunate to have this beautiful community that we have in Metro Detroit of writers and artists.
And by the way, I want to mention that we are having an event, a poetry event at West Bloomfield Library on Saturday, April 13th at 1 p.m., where it's going to be myself and you and Dunya Mikhail and Lamise. I just interviewed her recently. Sorry. I'll just have a little bit more coffee here. So we're having a poetry event that we were just discussing was intended years ago. It was before the pandemic. It was scheduled, and because of the pandemic, we couldn't go through with it. But then now we're having it again. So it's and it should be wonderful because we're going to be reading our poetry, and there's a documentary that we're all in about Iraqi-born women poets.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited that we're able to make that happen and grateful to you and to the West Bloomfield Library for having us.
Thank you. So let's start with where you were born, Alise, and what was it like growing up as an Iraqi American?
Yeah, definitely. Well, my trajectory has been a little bit here and there. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and moved to Detroit as a young person, and then had a couple of periods when I was quite young where we lived in Iraq. Oops. Are you still there?
You did live in Iraq. How long did you live there for?
We lived there for a year, and I actually went to school there when I was quite young in the first grade, and then we lived there another time for just for the summer.
So what memories do you have of that?
You know, I have beautiful memories. The last time I was actually there was in 1996, actually, during the economic sanctions. So a very different experience to go back as an adult with my dad and my sisters and have time with family. So that's the one that lives most recently in my memory, is that trip during the 90s. But as a child, yeah, I went to a school, Al Mansour School, had a beautiful experience there. It's an international school. It still exists, I believe. And so there were the kind of English speaking part of the school, which was made up of families from Europe and the States and other parts of the world, and then the Iraqi speaking side, the Arabic speaking side. And so we would come together for different events and things like that. I always regret that I learned in English because I never learned Arabic, which is really still something that I feel quite sad about.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I was also, I was born in Baghdad and I went to school there, but I left early. I left at age 9 and came to the United States. But I also went back during the sanctions in 2000. And that, like you mentioned, is a totally different experience from when I was young and growing up. And it was a very sad state during that time. But so when you started, when did you start writing poetry? And I'm curious because since you did live in Iraq for a little while, how that influenced you as a poet. How much of that was kind of coming forward?
Yes, I'm so sorry. My dog is barking, and I hope
Okay,
it's not gonna be
anybody that knows me knows I love dogs so much.
okay.
He
She's
can
a
bark all day.
sweetheart, and she'll only bark for another couple minutes, hopefully,
What
because
kind of dog do you have?
she's a Cocker Spaniel Poodle mix, so
Oh.
Luna, so sorry. Yeah, so I primarily grew up in Detroit, and I would say I grew up in a community it was extremely diverse area of the city, but not an area with a lot of other Arab Americans or Arab families. Um, and so I grew up going to school in Detroit. I went to Wayne State University and really met a lot of amazing artists and activists from that community. Um, but Iraq and my experience as an Iraqi American has always been part of what I write about, what I think about. Um, and so it's definitely influenced my writing, both sort of the challenges of navigating as somebody who is half something and half something else. My mother is American. My father, like I said, was born in Iraq and came here to finish his education. So that sort of space that we exist in when we feel a strong allegiance to our heritage, but that's not fully who we are, I would say is something that has definitely impacted my writing. And then just aspects of the history and culture of Iraq for sure. Like we talked about during the sanctions, I was very involved with other people in the Arab and Chaldean community and others in trying to bring awareness to that issue, which was so devastating for people in Iraq. And so it's always ever present in my mind, I would say, for sure.
So, by the way, when your dog was barking, my dog had started to join in. I muted, and I thought, you know what, maybe they want to join in this interview or something
Yes.
like that. Um,
Yes.
we, I don't know. I often talk about how people that have any connection to Iraq, whether they're only one of their parents was born in Iraq, whether they both parents were or even grandparents and they were born here, there's that connection that
Mhm.
everybody has. I know a couple of people that I'm talking to right now who were born here, and the passion for their roots, understanding their roots and just having that feeling towards it. And I think part of that is just Iraq is just an amazingly rich, well, it's very rich with history, so
Correct.
rich with culture, so rich with I would even say diversity,
Mhm.
especially in the past. When you look back, there's so many people, for instance, there's people that I met who trace their roots. They said, oh, well, we traced our roots, we were Chaldeans. And they've embraced that openly and love it. And I thought, well, this is so beautiful that people there can just be of different backgrounds and embrace their different heritage. But the people even here, I think it's very hard to forget that that's our those are our roots, even as we embrace the wonderful world that we live in as Americans. And for you, I know that you've worked at Inside Out Literary Arts in Detroit for 2 decades. That's a long time, um, and that's a wonderful, wonderful place to be in.
Mhm.
um, so, what is your role in this organization, and what does working there mean to you?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've worked at Inside Out for quite a while. For anyone who doesn't know, we're a Detroit based nonprofit literary arts organization. So we bring creative writing into schools throughout Metro Detroit. And then we also have an award winning after school program for teens called Citywide Poets. And then we offer a variety of programs in the community as well. So we work with older adults. We work with other organizations who serve young people to bring in opportunities for people to write and express themselves. My role there is as school and community program director. So that means I get to plan amazing events in the community that expose new audiences to poetry and to our mission. Um, and I also get to work directly with school districts throughout the Metro Detroit area that bring our program in. And one of the really unique things about Inside Out Literary Arts, and we're coming up on our 30th year of being in existence, is that we really believe in acknowledging the voices of young people. So we publish school literary journals in every school that we're in. We offer young people opportunities to perform their poetry at events. We just had a young person who read an original poem that she wrote at the groundbreaking ceremony for a new park on the Detroit riverfront. So we really try to uplift youth voice and make sure that they are part of the conversations, the really important conversations that are happening across the region.
I want to ask you, have you observed, since you've been there for so long, how does allowing them to have a voice, the youth, how have you from observation seen that helps them or changes them even?
Oh, absolutely. I think what happens sometimes, I think we all have a voice. It's more like in which ways and in what opportunities do you have to express yourself? And I think sometimes when young people feel they are not a typical A student, they might feel like they can't express themselves or they can't use their voice because maybe they don't have the traditional tools to be able to do so. But through poetry, through creative writing, when they have an opportunity to really write about what matters to them or what they're interested in and express themselves creatively, they often realize they do have talents, they do have skills, they have opportunities. We have quite a number of students who have received scholarships. We offer a scholarship every year to a student in our after school program. So many of our students go on to pursue opportunities that include writing. So whether they choose to go on and become a poet or they're working in the fields of journalism or marketing. And then we have other people who've come through our program and have found it really beneficial, but they're now engineers or architects or lawyers. But I think we all know that no matter what path we take in life, an opportunity and an understanding of the value of self-expression, how to stand up in front of an audience of people and share your opinions and your ideas is something that you need for the rest of your life, both in college as well as in a work setting.
Yeah, I totally, of course, I mean, for me as a writer, I totally believe in that. But I also have been in situations, I mean, where we came from, it wasn't, you're not encouraged so much to be so expressive. And I see how detrimental that is when you don't have those opportunities. So I've seen the other side, and I'm so grateful that I think Westerners have given me so many platforms to express myself, to express my writing. And it wasn't until much later in life that I thought that how significant that is to certain healings that take place, that you think like writing is just, oh, you're expressing yourself. But there's a lot of healing that and growth that happens by the ability to do so. So you're the Inside Out. I mean, that how do you, what's the website? I know that I can't share it right here. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
Inside Out, is it just
it's
insideout.org?
it's insideoutdetroit.org.
Detroit. Okay.
Yes, and so we have an events page where we list upcoming events. We're getting ready to do a huge conference for teens at Wayne State University on March 9th. So if there are any young people or families who are listening right now and you have a young person who's interested in writing, it's free. It's open to any teen, 13 to 19. Ross Gay is our keynote. He's an amazing writer that we're fortunate to be bringing to Detroit. And we'll also have him presenting in the evening, and people are welcome to buy tickets just for that portion of the event. And so, yeah, I encourage people to look at our website and get familiar with what we do for sure.
Well, thank you for all your work, but also thanks to Inside Out for all these programmings and for being around for 30 years. That says a lot. So now let's get to your book, which is, it's a book of poetry, What to Count. And it was, as I mentioned earlier, published by Wayne State University Press. So can you read us a couple of poems from there, about 3 poems. We would love to hear
For
your read.
sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Let's see. I think I will start with a poem that I actually wrote for Dunya Mikhail, who is a dear friend to both of us, and who's reading with us at the library. Um, she's somebody who is just known the world over for her writing, and is somebody that I'm fortunate to have come to know, and just really admire her as a human being and as a writer. So this is called The Poem for Dunya. There was a poem I started. It had one good leg, the one that seemed to want to run, the one that had no shoes, the poem that went its own way and never came back, the poem I lost, and the one that resurfaced between breaths in the grounds of my coffee, the poem he wanted me to write, or she, or they, the one that everyone hated and kept at a distance. There was the poem that came disguised as spam, the one got stuck in my teeth and no one bothered to tell me, the poem I scraped like burnt toast into the trash. There was the poem that sounded like a bed hitting the wall, the one everyone thought was something else. There was the poem with too many tropes, the one that danced for the wrong audience, that expired before we could drink it. There was the one that needed birds or something wet to finish it, the one I ate with the smallest spoon. There was the poem my friend told me was waiting for me. I saw it in the window, slowly lifted my hand to wave, but the light changed and one of us looked away. This is a poem called Capture the Flag, and it sort of addresses what Liam was asking me about earlier, which is what it was like growing up in Detroit as an Iraqi American. In this game, we try to burn down the house, cooking foreign foods on a holiday no one knows to celebrate. We fumble our way into the bedroom, glass doorknob lost, screwdriver in hand, and sleep curled in one bed, holding forth with the overseas operator. Each word is an echo, punctuated by beeps, seconds ticking into years of missing family. We come from nowhere, from Cleveland, from Baghdad, named for dictators and distant relatives, like shady garden patches full of uneatable vegetables, frying pans still smoldering in a snowbank, round Iraqi sausages charred on a paper napkin. We came to Detroit for a funeral and never left. The all electric house, ivy smothering bricks, birds nesting in chimneys, perched ourselves on a tree that didn't grow up but out, ran the streets, feet tagging the center island, safe. Games named for actions never fully realized. Capture the flag, ghost in the graveyard, Marco Polo. The object was always to appear normal, American, unafraid as doors slamming, borders closing between us and them, language peppered with the wrong words, customs that dissuaded friendships beyond the front porch, flight path forming above roof lines even as it disappeared.
That was so beautiful, Elise.
Thank
That
you.
was very touching, and that's, I feel like, something I could really relate.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear it. Yeah, one of the poems was obviously about the struggle to write sometimes and all of the drafts that we have that we come back to or sometimes don't come back to because they're just not working for us. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. That was, and if you have another one, there is time. I'd love for you to share if you have one more.
Sure, absolutely. Let me find. This is a ghazal. So you'll notice there's repetition in this poem, and it's called Imitation Spring. I know we were talking a little bit earlier about COVID, and this is a poem that was written during that time. Our daughter was born without a sense of smell in spring, came home on the hottest day, a record breaking spring. At 3, she pressed a fistful of lilacs to her face, inhaled hard, an imitation of what it is to smell, what I did at the start of spring, to find flowers were color, texture only, trying embedded in her heart, like this virus too steals all sense, that sudden loss springing ahead of the other symptoms. There's missing something, and there's never having it. She's old enough to know this, her 18th spring. Every sense a balm and bane, hers more pronounced, that pink too bright, hard sound of paper against itself. She lifts from a different spring, memory, a story of want and sound, like those small figures she gathered around her as a child, paused before the story flowered. Now she startles us pre dawn, breaks her fast alone downstairs, the lunar cycle, dates and yogurt, her ode to this pandemic spring, the condition's name we hear all year but never speak, echoes of our late insomnia, lost lull, want of sleep.
That was lovely. I can't wait until April 13, and we'll be listening to maybe whether you're going to choose these poems or other poems that are going to be read by you and the other poets. So I really encourage anybody who's obviously it's a free event, but I encourage people to come. And there's a wonderful video, like a mini documentary that's 10 minutes that highlights us that thanks to Dunya it was through a grant that was funded by the Knights Foundation that was awarded to Dunya, and she gave us this opportunity. So that was wonderful as well. You've been involved with the Arab American National Museum for a while, and at some point you taught poetry to teenagers there. But in general, what relationship have you had with the Arab American Museum, and what was that experience like, or is
Yeah.
currently?
Yeah, well, I love to talk about the Arab American National Museum. It's one of my favorite places. And actually, before there was an actual physical building to the museum, there was always arts and culture opportunities through access. And so when I was a young writer, they would bring in folks like Naomi Shihab Nye and Mona Simpson and other writers to come and workshop with us. And that was really a pivotal, important part of my experience as a young writer. And so I was just thrilled when they had an opportunity to find the funding to actually open a physical space for the museum. And then I was extra thrilled when I was able to teach. I taught two sessions of a creative writing fellowship that is for teens, and actually they're offering it again. And so I would encourage any young person who's interested in growing their skills as a writer to check out the museum's website. And just in general, for folks to be familiar with the opportunities and events that they offer there. But yeah, I consider that sort of like a home base in a way. The museum, it's just always been an important part of my life. So whether I'm going there for a poetry reading or a film or some kind of an event, or reading there myself, I just feel like a sense of home when I'm there. And I think they do remarkable work for the community. And I'm so just pleased to have been a part of that, shaping who I am as a writer, and to see that continue to grow and evolve is just a beautiful thing.
It is very beautiful, and I want to mention. I often mention this, but the importance of the state of Michigan to Middle Easterners in general. Um, well, to everybody, but particularly to Middle Easterners, because the Arab American National Museum is the only Arab American museum in the United States, and the Chaldean Museum is the first and only museum in the world. All this in this state, so I think it's, to me, when I hear that, it just feels like it's so like a little Middle East, but in a positive way, because we have opportunities to do these cultural exchanges and expressions. And I think we do it in a beautiful way. I want to emphasize that because I know there's sometimes some stereotypes or negativities, but it really isn't like that. And there's like this interest shared interest in the communities that sometimes is not seen as much as it deserves to be seen, in my opinion. I think there's so much beautiful things that happen in our communities, whether Chaldean, Arabic, Muslim, Christian, others, Mandians. There's so much that happens that I hope that that's what we try to do through these programs, is to kind of highlight the beauty of what is happening in Michigan, especially with the Middle Eastern community. And so, you being there helps do that. And I know Dunya has been involved in that with them in the past, and other friends of mine have as well. So, poets who are starting out. So poetry is not like, like it's not a money making business.
For sure.
It's very
Yeah.
creative, and it's like a soul make. To me, I think it's like it's very enriching writing. I feel like when you're doing it, there's such privilege and richness to that. Um, but a lot of writers or poets starting off sometimes don't get the support that they need. This happens often in certain communities because of the fact that we are more like education driven, career driven, things that, on an economic basis. What advice would you give poets? I guess, in general, but particularly towards the communities that feel it's harder for them to kind of steal that time to write because of the push towards education, working, other professions. What advice would you give these
Yeah,
writers?
yeah, I mean, I think for all writers, there's an element of like, how do I make space in my life? Whether, you have a full-time job or you're raising your children or you're a young person just starting out as a writer. And I do think having some type of a schedule for yourself. Like I know for myself, I get up really early in the morning and write when my house is quiet, right before I have to think about work, right before I look at my email. Um, so I would say make time for writing in your life, and it could be 20 minutes a day, it could be 20 minutes a month, but finding that space to express yourself, I think, is really important. And then the other thing is to seek out a community. I feel very fortunate to have found my community of writers and artists. When I was a young person, I went to Cass Tech and then I went to Wayne State University, and they were both thriving communities full of opportunities for young artists. I think there's even more opportunities now because there's online opportunities, there's in-person opportunities. And I would say the biggest advice I always give people is to not give up, because like, for example, when I received the Kresge Award, I had applied many times before I received it. And I've had a couple of experiences like that in my life where I think, oh, I'm not going to try again with this. And then I force myself to, because our work gets stronger through the practice of writing, and those opportunities are there for us. It doesn't matter what background you're from. It's like those opportunities exist and they want people to take advantage of them. And whether you have success immediately or it takes a while, it does happen. And I just think the biggest thing is find that community of people who can read your work, who can give you feedback, who you trust, to understand what your voice is on the page. And I think it's important for young people, whether they choose to become a writer as their career or not, there's value in that expression. And there's lots of people who are, and there's many examples throughout history of people who are doctors, but they also write poetry. Like Fadi Judah is a phenomenal Palestinian poet, and he's also a physician. So, and he's won the Yale Younger Poets Prize and all kinds of prizes for his poetry while also being a doctor. So I know that it is possible to do that and also have a career. And so don't give up on your writing just because you think you're on a particular path, I think, is the biggest advice.
That's excellent advice. Really good advice. I think it's like there's no excuse for anybody. Even when I mean, even for ourselves, I think as writers, I have to find the time because I have a full-time job and I have a lot of things that I juggle. So I feel like I'm in the same position. Is like, where do I find this time? And you're right, that 20 minutes, sometimes when it feels like, oh, is it even worth it? Yes, it is worth it. At the end of the
Absolutely.
day, over an accumulation of days, over accumulation of years, yes, that 20 minutes a day is really worth it. And just, to connect with that. So, Elise, our time is up. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was fun just talking to you and learning from you. And I look forward to our event with the West Bloomfield Library. It's hosted by the Chaldean hosted by the West Bloomfield Library in collaboration with the Chaldean Cultural Center. We really appreciate your participation with that. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. I look forward to talking to you the next time we publish a book.
Thank you so much.
Interview.
Thank you, Wiam. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Elise. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.